Hello and welcome to LionWing Talks, a weekly show where we discuss all things LionWing, tabletop games, Japanese games, and localization. I'm your host, Bradley Hailstorm, founder and president of LionWing. This is episode 24 of the show, our weekly show, which goes down every Wednesday night here on Twitch at 9 p.m. EST. If you're not aware, we do have a Monday show that is less regular, but you can still catch it from time to time. Usually we drop a notice ahead of time so you know whether you can join us that night or not. It happens on Mondays, 9 p.m. EST as well. It's called LionWing Plays. It's a bit of a sister show where we play LionWing games. This week we didn't have it. I wanted to. I couldn't quite get my setup ready in time because I was going to record some Wild Hunt Festival. Perfect week too, since everyone seems to be getting their games this week. Couldn't get my setup set up. So I'm going to be coming back at some point and playing some Wild Hunt Festival. But tonight, we're going to be talking about Wild Hunt Festival. Not playing it, but talking about it. We also have a lot of questions from the chat. Well, actually, we've got a lot of questions from one person. 26 questions from one person. Sai in the Discord saw that the queue was a little light this evening and said, he dropped me a DM and was like, yo, can I ask questions tonight? I said, yeah, sure. He said, do you care how many? I said, no, ask however many you want. And 26. So here we go. So full disclosure, this is the first time that I've been in front of my computer all day. So I've been monitoring Kickstarter and Discord from my phone throughout the day, but even that I have been pretty absent from. Had a bunch of stuff happening today that didn't allow me to get in front of the computer. So I'm sitting down and I'm looking at these questions for the first time that I'm about to answer, which means you're going to get some really raw answers from me, which is probably the best way to answer these questions anyway. In fact, I've gone on record many times and said I like when I look at questions for the first time on the air because then I can't bullshit you. So that's always a good thing. If this is your first time joining the show, hey, thanks for checking us out. We do have a format for the show, which we will be following tonight to a degree. We always start off the show with our question and answer session, so our Q&A from the community, questions that are submitted by the community to us through usually Discord, but sometimes through a Kickstarter campaign page, a DM, social media, etc. Once we're through with the Q&A, which tonight could take about 18 hours, we then move into project updates where I give some updates on our various projects. I'll be talking obviously about Wild Hunt Festival quite a bit tonight. I'll be giving some light updates on our other projects, Gun and Gun, Embryo Machine specifically, and then we'll close out the show. I try to keep the show to about an hour and a half, but if you have been watching the show for any length of time, you know that's kind of a running gag at this point. We'll see if it happens tonight. With 26 questions, I'm not convinced it's going to happen, but I'm going to try my best because it's been a long day, and I'd like to go to bed early tonight. I don't know if it's going to happen, though. Let me check the chat here. How are folks doing? Hope things are good. Let's see, let's move my chat there, and that there, and then that there. Okay. Did I miss anything? All right. I think that means it's time to get into some questions. I am particularly thirsty tonight. I'm also running a little late because my child was outside engaging in balloon wars, water balloon wars with the neighborhood kids, which means we stayed out kind of late. So I'm coming pretty much from outside. I'm a sweaty mess and really thirsty. I apologize. Off to a great start, right? Let's get into some questions. I'm looking at Discord here. This question came in, I think, shortly after last week's show from Rogue Knight. And this is in response to a shirt that I was wearing last week, which I said is my one of my favorite shirts, and it's the oldest shirt that I have, and it still fits me. It's from when I was in high school. I bought it when I was 17, and here I am all these years later, still wearing it. So I think this question is in response to that. Rogue says, honest, do you have a routine workout schedule? How do you stay fit and fit into your 17-year-old t-shirt with a job that is mostly stationary, sitting in front of a computer all day? Yeah, so for whatever reason, it's in my DNA to just naturally be a little thinner, and and so it wasn't until about like 2 years ago or so when I noticed like I can no longer rely on my DNA to keep me in shape, because I used to do nothing. I was just like, yeah, I'll let my genes do all the work, genes with a G. And now like exercise, working out, that's for the birds. And then, my 30s hit, and my body was like, hey, we need some help these days, dude. Now, especially since the pandemic, my fitness routine is a little different than it used to be. But right now, I can tell you that I do a combination of fitness boxing, actually, for Switch, for my cardio. That's really helpful for me. I personally have to gamify my workouts, or I just don't do them. I'm not someone who's sort of intrinsically motivated to work out, and going to a gym has never worked for me. So I needed to I realized that I needed to work in some kind of like game aspect into my workout regimen, and so I grabbed fitness boxing a while ago, and then Fitness Boxing 2 came out, which is significantly better. I was doing Ring Fit Adventure there for a hot minute. That was fun. I didn't love it though. It wasn't giving me the type of workout that I wanted. So I had heard good things about fitness boxing. It's great for cardio. I really like music anyway. So it's like, oh yeah, I can engage with some, in this workout to some songs that I already know. Like that's fun. And then I have, oh, it's not back there, but I have, I have my 360 hooked up in my Connect for my 360 hooked up. And I can't quite recall the name of the game, but I use it for all things not related to cardio. So it's got really good like ab workouts, which I try to focus on a lot, along with just like core strengthening types of exercises. And again, it's all like gamified, and it helps me. I'm sure there's plenty of options out there, but those are just the ones that I found worked for me, especially because it was connected to gaming. And I was like, you know what? I need to know my strengths, and I need to know my limitations in life. And if I can connect something to gaming, I'm going to be far more interested in it. And therefore, I need all the help I can get to be interested in working out. And so that's kind of my regimen right now. I also do a 16-hour fast every night. So I don't eat or drink anything other than water or carbonated water after 7 p.m. And then I don't eat or drink anything until 11 a.m. the next day. So from 7 p.m. to 11 a.m., nothing goes in me except water. So I do that every night. The combination, it all seems to work for me. Everyone's different, right? Everyone's motivations and incentives for doing these types of things, for working on fitness, are different. How they get to those goals, if it's even important to them, is different. So this is just the stuff that works for me. I'm also not like a huge snacker necessarily, though I have realized it's come into sharp focus with the pandemic that I tend to be both a boredom eater and a stress eater, which isn't like terribly uncommon. I think a lot of people stress eat. Not everyone eats out of boredom. I do. So I've had to watch that a little bit. Anyway, you asked the question, so I gave you the answer in case anyone else other than Rogue was interested in my dietary habits. Okay. Next question actually came from Rogue as well, but a week later. So that question was from last week. Here's a question from today. How do you prove fulfillment to Kickstarter in order to queue up the next campaign? It doesn't have to be 100% fulfilled, such as all territories, before they let you start the next one. So there are some things that you've got to do behind the scenes on Kickstarter with a project to let them know where your fulfillment stands. So I personally don't do a lot with that, because we have a fulfillment partner that we link into all of our Kickstarter accounts, who has access to the back end of fulfillment in the Kickstarter portal when it comes to like the creator portal. And so Funnigan, for instance, because that's our fulfillment center on Wildin Festival and Gunny Gun, and likely will be our fulfillment center on Embryo Machine as well. They take care of all that. So as they're going through and they're fulfilling territories, they're checking proverbial boxes, and in some case, literally checking boxes. And that all of that data goes to the Kickstarter team. So when the Kickstarter team, the review team, looks at your next project, they can pull up, all your projects that you have, those are outstanding, and where your status, what your status is on each of those. You do not have to have all territories fulfilled. You have to have the majority of your backers fulfilled. I think it's something like 75%, which is good because we're at 75% now. In fact, I think we're a little bit over 75%. I think we're like 80 to 85. I think that's where we're at right now. Because, as I mentioned this morning, I don't even know anymore. EU fulfillment is finished. Australia fulfillment should be finished in the next day or two. And then Canada and Mexico will likely be the last ones to cross the finish line. And unfortunately, the shipment and fulfillment in Canada has been a lot slower than I was anticipating. And perhaps it was just my own miscalculation or my own misconceptions about how the fulfillment process was going to work for Canada in specific that led me to think that we were going to be on a faster timeline than we actually are. I'm not sure. Or if my expectations were in line and then something kind of like fell apart there with shipping logistics and it's just taking longer. I don't know. But it does look like Canada's the last to cross the line, as is the case often. I think someone even mentioned that in Discord at some point. So we're past the threshold now. So we'll be submitting Project Requiem for review tomorrow, actually, to the Kickstarter team. And it takes them about 3 days to get back to you to review your project and then to approve it. Now, they might come back and say, like, well, because you do have 3 projects, we want 100% out of this one. I don't know. You don't always get the same people looking at your projects. And although they have a manual to go by, I've gotten the sense that the manual's a little loose in that regard. So who knows? They might say, like, no, you got to have a higher fulfillment percentage. I hope not, because I want to be able to get Project Requiem to Kickstarter. We need 4 weeks from when we're able to launch the lander page for the Kickstarter, which means we have to be approved by the Kickstarter approval team, because I want 4 weeks of a marketing campaign, as I've mentioned before. Let's see here. Checking in on the chat. Oh, hey, Noel. Thanks for joining us. I saw that you recently followed us on Twitch. I was wondering when you were going to make your appearance. So Noel actually worked on Project Requiem. And has helped with Midnight Saga. So there you have it. Frank, you got yours today. Awesome. Frank, you're not in Canada, are you? If you are, that means Canadian fulfillment's happening quicker than expected. But I don't think you are, Frank. I don't think you are in Canada. Okay. So, next question. New York, gotcha. Okay, Rogue had another question here. How does it feel to finally have karate in your hands and in backers' hands? It feels damn good. This project, especially coming off the heels of Testament and the issues that we ran into there, it was really important that we got this one right. I knew we had gotten it right, all along, but there's always that doubt, like before it gets into hundreds of people's hands, it's kind of like, all right, I think we did everything right. I think we caught all the errors. I think everything's in alignment. I think everything's consistent. I think the components look the way we want them to look. Like, you don't really know, no matter if you have production samples or not, until the actual final product gets into the hands of backers, because the final product is getting into your hands the same time that it's getting into everyone else's hands. In fact, I still haven't gotten my all of my orders yet from Fun Again. So some of you all have your copies of the final product before I do. That's sort of ironic, right? So it feels really good that the project is, mostly fulfilled now across the board, barring the regions that I just talked about. And, we're really proud of this project. We worked on it for a while. I mentioned last week, I think it was last week, that I put a lot of myself into karate, and so this project had like very specific special meaning for me. So it's really cool that not only is it finally out there in the wild, but people seem to be really enjoying it, which is what you're hoping for always, right, in this line of work. I'll be talking a little bit about karate and specific components, that kind of thing, questions from the Kickstarter. When we get into the project updates, I won't be answering those specific questions here. in this Q&A, but I will be talking about Wild Hunt specific issues, questions, etc. during the WHF update here in a little bit. I see Sai in the chat is already pushing Noelle for her to break her silence on what Project Requiem is. Good luck, Sai. And on to the next question. So, Swordman21, do you have any guilty pleasure anime that you know are objectively bad but still love? Oh, sure. Angel Sanctuary, like immediately comes to mind. I don't know if this is objectively bad, but it's not an anime that I typically tell people that I like. I don't even know why, but Sakura Diaries, which is an older, either late 90s, early 2000s kind of slice of life, fairly short series. I don't tell a lot of people that I like that. Guilty pleasures, though, that I know are objectively bad other than Angel Sanctuary. I can't think of any others. I mean, I guess this isn't a guilty pleasure because I talk about it all the time, but I know it's an unpopular opinion because most people would disagree with me when I say that Grimgar is a fantastic series. Most people would laugh me out of the room for saying that. Most people find that series to be either boring, unable to live up to the excellence that is the light novel series, or they think it's just, flat out garbage or a combination of all three. So I don't hide my love of Grimgar, but I typically have to like feel out the room to before I finally say like, hey, by the way, I like Grimgar. Yeah. So that's probably not a very popular opinion. I'm really trying to think of other ones that I think are bad that I like. So it's interesting with anime. So I will fully admit, like, when it comes to video games, I like a lot of objectively bad games. In fact, most of my favorite games of all time kind of like sit in that like 5 to 7 out of 10 region. I typically don't like like good video games. I just don't. I don't know why. So if you ask me, like, do you have any guilty pleasure video games that you know are objectively bad? I got a laundry list. I'll just go through like my top 20 games, and you'll be able to catch like 15 of them that are bad. But anime, I don't know. Maybe I just happen to always gravitate toward things that are liked or whatever. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I guess Blood is. I don't know if Blood is like objectively bad though. Certainly, at the time, you didn't want to say that you liked Blood, but I like Blood: The Last Vampire. Anyway. Oh, look at that. Noelle coming in through clutch. It's expensive. I like working here. Bloodsea was a trip. A trip, yeah. That's one way to describe it. All right, on to question 1 of size 26 part question barrage. Let's see here. Have you thought about distributing LionWing Talks as an audio-only podcast, like on Apple iTunes? This question is not necessarily for me showing interest, just wondering about the thought process. Yeah, so actually at least the first episode, but maybe the first 2 episodes, I did throw up on Spotify and a few other places, and I gotta be honest, it was just too much damn work. And I threw up the first couple episodes, or at least the first episode, and it wasn't like people were beating down the doors to listen to LionWing Talks in an audio format. Now, maybe they would now, that was episode 1, so that was quite a long time ago. But I'm inclined to believe it'd be the same thing. And to me, it's just not worth the trouble. It's if you want to listen to just the audio, you can catch that on YouTube. Yes, it's absolutely not the same. I understand that. There are limitations of trying to only listen to audio on YouTube while having to multitask either on that device or something else. So I understand a more straightforward audio only platform would completely get around the limitations of YouTube in that regard. It's just not worth it to me though. If I had someone like taking care of that for me and they wanted to, figure out a way to slice the audio and throw it up on wherever, cool. But I'm not going to do that myself. There's, when you're kind of a one man show, in terms of like the back end stuff, at some point you gotta take inventory of what's really important and what's not as important. And that's one of those things that at first I was like, hey, this might be important. And then I realized amidst all the other things that I was doing, like, you know what, this actually isn't important. This isn't important at all. I don't give a shit about doing this, so I'm not going to do it. That doesn't mean I'll always hold that sentiment. Maybe I have a change of heart one day. Who knows? But right now, we'll just stick with YouTube. Okay. All right, Noel. So Noel in the chat says, since working in anime, I've heard people say Record of Lodoss War is bad. So I guess Bradley and I agree there on bad anime we like anyway. All right, so I will fight someone. Over Record of Lodoss War. If anyone says that Record of Lodoss War is a bad anime, they're a bad person. All right, that's my line. That's my line in the sand, and I'm drawing it there. All right, I will go down swinging, saying that Record of Lodoss War is a fantastic anime, as evidenced by the poster. I mean, it's classic fantasy anime. I'm trying to figure out how someone could not like Record of Lodoss War. And maybe there's someone in the chat right now who's like, yeah, no, Record of Lodoss War is trash, and I'll tell you why. By all means, let me hear it. Like, aside from the dub, I can't think of a bad thing about that show, or any of its incarnations. So, but at least Noel and I can go down swinging together. Next question. You have multiple avenues of communication between Discord, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LionWing Talks, all the Kickstarter update feeds, your website, your newsletter. What is the minimum set of mediums one needs to follow to get all of the LionWing news? Honestly, Discord. All the news that's important breaks first on Discord. For instance, I haven't written a tweet or a Facebook post or a newsletter post or an Instagram post or a Kickstarter update that EU fulfillment's finished. But I said it in Discord. So if you have to choose a platform, and you want the platform to be the one where you're going to ascertain the most information from us, it's Discord. It's the easiest to post to. I'm on it all day in some regard. If it's not pulled up on a screen on my computer, then I've got it on my phone and I'm pretty regularly checking it. So that is your best source of information. I do need to utilize our newsletter more. I've been told that by our marketing specialist, who's like, get on the newsletter thing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll get to it. And then I never get to it. But certainly, it is important that we have a social media presence on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, just because a lot of people don't want to bother with Discord, or even if they're a part of our server, they're not checking it regularly, whereas they might be checking Twitter and Facebook and Instagram regularly. And so it's all of the platforms play an important role in any company, but especially a small company such as LionWing. So I would say, like, if you could only go to one source, it's Discord. But I always encourage folks to, find us through whatever means makes the most sense for you. Find us on the platform that makes the most sense for you. Find us on the platform that you use the most for your own news ascertainment. Do that. Because all of the news eventually gets to all of our channels anyway. It's just kind of like, at what speed is the news going to get there? Discord will always break first because it's the easiest to post a quick little one-sentence update for. Whereas Twitter and Facebook has to be a bit more elegantly composed. And then, of course, a Kickstarter update is a whole thing in and of itself. But all of that news gets to all of those platforms. You just might have to wait 3 hours, 8 hours a day in the event of a Kickstarter update a week, since we tend to post weekly or monthly Kickstarter updates. So I always encourage people don't only use our Kickstarter updates to stay up to date on our stuff. That's probably the least effective way to do it. But I know that some people do that. So Af, you are always retweeting the tweets. I love you for it. Yes, I really appreciate that. It keeps our tweets from not looking so lonely. Let's see here. Retainer Box. Oh, it's Win. Said I would 100% listen to LionWing Talks audio only version, but okay, YouTube it is. Hey, I mean, Winona, if you want to put it into a podcast format, be my guest. Then we can listen to it through audio only means all day long. Let's see here. Mox, or Light Alice, as they're being called now. I'll go watch it right now to find something bad about it. Of course, talking about Lotus War. So this is Frank, Silent Frank, and I are essentially the same person, as I found out when it comes to like our gaming preferences. And so I love when Frank is always dragging the lake and pulling up these relics of history that, you know, only so few of us know at this point, us old people. And Silent Frank says Lotus War had that dope Dreamcast game too. Yeah, so Lotus War had that dope Diablo clone Dreamcast game. You know, this is where we might divert, Frank. I don't know if I would call Lotus War on Dreamcast a dope game. I would say it was competent at best. That's probably the most praise I can give that game. Like, if someone was like, you have to play Lotus War right now, I'd be like, okay, like I'll only hate my life a little bit while I do it. But certainly if someone's like, you can play Lotus War right now, or like any other Dreamcast game, I would probably say, cool, what else you got for me? You were young. All right, Frank. Yeah, so you've got a little bit of an explanation, a justification, because, you know, when you're young, like every game's good. You don't even know what a bad video game is. You're just like, yeah, playing the video games. I'm playing all the video games. This is so cool. And then, you know, you go back as you're older with a more critical eye and you're like, this is trash. What? Oh, yeah, no, I was high school age too, Frank. So no, that means you were not young. You knew better. You knew better, my friend. You knew better. Sin Theory in the chat, one of our community leads. Hey, Sin just said, hey, finished babysitting. Glad I only missed the first 8 months. First eighth of tonight's show. I thought you said I only missed the first 8 months of this show. And that's about right based on all these questions that I have here. Hold on, I got to take a drink. This will make for good audio. Okay. Let's get back to it. Next question. With what appears to be the new website, unless it's been too long since I last checked, there doesn't seem to be any mention anymore of the video games you localized. Was this a conscious decision? Yes, it was. So, as I mentioned, you know, LionWing became a company, and our first project was Sonoma Coliseum. That went up on Kickstarter, summer of 2018. After that, we did 2 video games, kind of back to back. Basically, our next 2 releases were video games, Horgy-Hue and The Adventures of Tin and Till. Both are great games, especially Tin and Till is super awesome. But I realized, you know, after Tin and Till, I was really proud of that localization, like really, really proud of the localization work we did there. I just realized that although before I formed LionWing, I came from video games localization, and of course I love video games. I realized I don't know if after Tin and Till released, it was one of those like aha moments where I was like, you know what, we need to really pick a focus here. I don't want to split. I don't want to split us because it was getting hard to like describe who we were and what we did. Like, oh yeah, we're a localization company, but then people be like, oh, what do you localize? Kind of board games, kind of video games, and it's kind of like I came to this point where I was like, all right, pick a lane, dude. Like, you know, don't fracture your identity. Like, don't be that company that has an identity crisis. You're way too young to be having an identity crisis as a company. You need to kind of pick a direction and go with it. And I decided I'm just simply more passionate about tabletop games, at least when it comes to localization work and when it comes to, I mean, in many ways, playing them and working on them. So it was a conscious decision to say, all right, we're just going to focus on tabletop games for right now. And because of that, I needed to make a break from our video game releases. So they're still out there. They're still on Steam. We still tweet about them or post, whatever from time to time about them, but it's not our focus any longer. That doesn't mean that we won't go back to that space at some point, but for the time being, it's important, when you're a young company, that you build a strong brand identity. And I realized that we were not doing that. The water was getting muddied, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to deal with that any longer. So I had that talk with myself of like, all right, what do you want to do here? And so that's what happened. I will say this though, I would like to get back into the video game space just to do video game adaptations of our tabletop games. Now that I'm down with all day long. So that I have a very strong interest. I have a very strong interest in doing that. We'll see what comes of it, because that's a whole other endeavor. That's a whole other financial commitment. It's commitment in a lot of ways, and we're not quite ready for that. And the right opportunity hasn't come along just yet for that to happen. But that, I think I can safely say, is in the cards at some point for us in the future. When that future is, I'm not sure. Let's see here. Gun and Gun RPG would be sick, half. Fern said twin stick gun and gun shooter. Let's go. That would be wild. That could be a lot of fun. Let's see here. Muso Midnight Saga would be super cool, and I think would work out very, very well. That, you know what? Actually, that makes a ton of sense. That would be so killer. I'm trying to think of a Muso game that has that kind of setting. And other than the recently released Sakura Wars, which is basically a Muso game with a strong RPG component to it, there's really no others out there like it. So there's some cool stuff you could do with really any of the properties that we've licensed and localized. I think, for me, I like more straightforward board game adaptations to video games. So I think of Aeon's End. I really like its PC and mobile conversion. It's just a card game that you're playing, on Steam. It doesn't feel super video gamey. It's just like, here is a way that I can engage with this game pretty much in the same way that I do on the tabletop, just minus the tabletop. And I like that kind of thing. So for instance, I would love to convert Wild Hunt Festival to an actual video game, but I wouldn't want to make it like a game. I mean, certainly you could utilize that license to make anything. You can utilize that to make a JRPG or to make a tactics game or make whatever game you wanted to, right? I would want to replicate the exact tabletop experience just in digital form. I think there's something to be said for that kind of thing. I love Heart of Crown, and it's just a straight adaptation. Like I said, I love Aeon's End. There are a slew of other board game adaptations that I really like. Victory and Valor is one of the more recent ones that I've been playing, which is, I think that's the name, Victory and Valor. It's a PC game that is an adaptation of a hex-based World War II war game. So I like that kind of approach when it comes to board game to video game adaptations. Next question. You enjoy running contests, tournaments, and leagues and other ways to interact together with the game, and you make an effort to give away goodies in all of them. Would you also help out community run events too by either promoting them or helping out with prizes? Fuck yes, I would. Yes. So I love community events. In many ways, community events are, not only are they super helpful for your game, for your brand, even for your own community, but you actually get to enjoy them as the company of the game that's being played in said community event. It's fun to be able to watch an event happen that's surrounding your product that you don't have to put on. Like, putting on events is a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a huge commitment. It's a huge investment. And so I love doing it. That's why we're doing it. That's why we had the Operation Bulletstorm event. That's why we're having another Gun and Gun event. That's why we're having the virtual league. That's why we're having the team tournament league for Wild Hunt Festival. So clearly I like events. I like tournaments. I like that approach to bringing a community together. As I've mentioned before, like, community is really important for me, and I want to continue to foster a community for LionWing. We've got just awesome people in this community, and so I want to continue to foster that kind of kindness and that sort of inclusivity and that kind of fun that we have here in the LionWing community. I want to continue to do that through leagues and tournaments and events, because I think all of those things accomplish that objective. And at the same time, it's a lot of fucking work, so it would be cool if someone else did it and I could just watch. So I am absolutely on board with other people running events for our games. Let's see here. Yes, Sin said, I second this. I'm assuming he's talking about everything that I just said about the work and how cool it is for for other people to kind of uphold the mantle for a little bit, because Sin has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. He and Real Beans have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes and setting up a lot of the LionWing tournaments and events. So hats off to Sin and Real Beans. And yeah, it's great. It would be great to see another community getting something started for some of our stuff. Are you interested in being the bridge / proxy between players that want to pay for additional content and the designers / art based on your contract and relationships? So this is the first time I'm reading this question. It's the first time I'm reading all these questions, other than maybe one of them in here, which I just happened to see come across my phone earlier. But are you interested in being the bridge between players that want to pay additional content and the designers? Yeah, I am. So I think it's important that we are just a channel that designers can use to expand their IPs, their properties, their games. I think that at the end of the day, LionWing doesn't exist without other people's stuff. And I try to never lose sight of that. So with that in mind, I like helping out designers, studios, as much as possible. I think I've mentioned a long time ago, that's why we have, I think, a very attractive and very generous contract in place in terms of royalties and upfront payments, that kind of thing for designers, because I want to pay people what their product is worth. And if I'm willing to go through the trouble to get a licensing contract, I clearly think a game is worth a lot. And so I want to make sure that my belief in that game and that design studio and the amount of worth that I place on that game and that design studio is reflected in how I pay them. Because at the end of the day, money talks. And so if we're stiffing our designers, what does that really say? What does that say about my view of them? Nothing good, right? These are people I respect, designers I respect, people who do things that I could only ever dream of doing. We don't exist without them, so it's like, let's pay them handsomely. So if players want to pay additional money or want to pay money for additional content, and that is going to help designers, we will absolutely be the bridge between those two to make sure it happens. And I mean, it's not all altruism here, right? Like, we do get some kind of gain from this as well. We profit from that a little bit, but it also keeps our products in the minds of people. That's why we've been doing this DLC thing. Not only was the DLC with Wild Hunt Festival a chance to make up for this, stupid long delay, but it was another chance to keep people engaged with the product long after it's already gotten into their hands. And perhaps in many ways, after they've already moved on to another game, like, oh, new DLC came out, I'll check it out. that's a good thing for us. You know, people are then checking out the game, which means they're checking out LionWing stuff, and it gets them back into the LionWing ecosystem. So it makes sense. Everyone profits in that way, even if it's not profiting monetarily. You're profiting in some other way, and it's always good for a business. If you want to be a successful business and you want to stay around, and you want to continue to help those designers, and you want to continue to do what it is you love, and that is to bring games to the larger world, or at least the Western world, then you got to figure out a way to make sure that your business stays afloat. And that's one of the ways to do it. I saw someone, they posted some comment on on one of the Kickstarter updates that I'm paraphrasing, but they were basically like, I know you're really excited about this DLC, but none of us give a fuck. No one cares about DLC. And I think they even like demanded, like, you should print the DLC immediately and get it to us. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. But, and it's also like, well, actually, quite a number of people are interested. It is, I do recognize, though, it is strange for an industry like the tabletop industry to produce DLC, but it's actually becoming more and more common. Subscription models are becoming more and more common in this field, which is like another version, you could say, of DLC to some degree. And so I think, roll back the clock, take us back to 2018 or something. And if someone was like, yeah, we got DLC, or 2017, like, hey, we got DLC, people be like, I don't know if that's needed. That's kind of weird. And now more and more people are doing it. So clearly, despite that Kickstarter comment, there's a market for it. And I'm a part of that market. I like DLC for my tabletop games, not just for LionWing stuff, but for other products. I like subscription services. Now, that doesn't mean LionWing's going to have a subscription service anytime soon, but I like subscription services for my tabletop games, especially for my tabletop role-playing games. That's just what I like. And so, I did bring a little bit of that into Wild Hunt Festival, and you'll probably see that kind of thing with a lot of our games going forward, where it makes sense. We're not going to probably do DLC for Gun and Gun. That doesn't make sense. Probably not going to do DLC for Embryo Machines. That doesn't make sense. But we will do DLC where it makes sense for our games. Yeah, and so Sai makes a really good point here. LCGs have existed since the mid-2000s, and that's all just DLC, right? How about, so Shinska, I know you've been beating this drum for a while, Shinska. How about just giving us the backsides of the DLC? So that will happen. In fact, it will happen with DLC 2 because you'll want to see the backside of at least one of those cards once we are ready to present them for people to download. So you can now rest easy in knowing that I've just committed to it on air that we're going to give you the backsides of these cards. Okay. Oh, I like this question. I'm about to watch Armitage III because of your recommendation. What form of compensation am I entitled to if I don't like it? You're entitled to the form of compensation where I don't give a fuck. That's the compensation you can get if you don't like Armitage III. And that's all I got to say about that. No, but seriously, Armitage III it's a product of its time. I think it still holds up, but I think it holds up well. But I'm also like an older dude who, grew up on 90s anime. And it's 90s anime. It's 90s cyberpunk anime. Now, a lot of people, I think, falsely draw a comparison, too much of a comparison, because maybe a little comparison's okay, but too much of a comparison between Armitage and Ghost in the Shell, because they both are like this, grim cyberpunk dystopian setting. But I kind of feel like that's where the similarities end. From there, they like go about their business in two very different ways. But because Armitage came out so close in proximity to Ghost in the Shell, people were like, fuck this show. It's not Ghost in the Shell. It's trying to be Ghost in the Shell. It'll never be Ghost in the Shell, so let's shit on it. Which is unfair because I don't think the two shows are very comparable at all. And I think I mentioned someone had asked a question during this section in one of the past shows, like, give me like your like a bad anime take. And I was like, oh yeah, Armitage III is better than Ghost in the Shell, even though I like Ghost in the Shell a ton. So I think Armitage III is cool. Armitage III played a really important role uh, in in the anime dub world. So most people don't think about like how did anime begin to get big, well-known English voice actors for their dubbed series or movies. It all kind of started with Armitage the Third. So before Armitage the Third, you certainly would have some voice actors who had done some movies and whatnot here in the States or in the Western world. But that was very, 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 very rare. In fact, I can't think of a single one, but I'm sure they're out there. So I'm going to give myself the out to say I'm sure they're out there somewhere. I just don't know of them. Armitage III was the first to hire, you know, big, well-known, especially for the time, actors for its dub work in Kiefer Sutherland and Elizabeth Berkley. So, I mean, most people know who Kiefer Sutherland is. If you weren't like an 80s or a 90s kid, you probably don't know who Elizabeth Berkley is, but she was a big name at that time. And so after that, more and more companies realized, like, hold on a second, Armitage probably got more recognition than it was due, perhaps because it hired some Hollywood A-listers, or perhaps in Berkeley's case, a B-lister, but still, that was more than most people had done at that point. And so started following suit. Oh, side, no, this isn't the first time that this isn't the first time I've gone on record to say that I prefer Armitage over Ghost in the Shell. No, this is at least the second time, but I bet I've said it 3 times. So, whoops. Yeah. So now, don't get me wrong. I love, 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 love Ghost in the Shell. And in many ways, Ghost in the Shell was a more important anime for me in terms of like getting me into the genre. It wasn't the first anime that I ever watched, as I've shared before that award goes to Perfect Blue. And then I can't ever remember if it was Perfect Blue, Ninja Scroll, then Ghost in the Shell, or if it was Perfect Blue, Ghost in the Shell, then Ninja Scroll. Either way, Ghost in the Shell played a much, 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 much more pivotal role in my getting into anime than Armitage III ever did. I just like Armitage III better. There. Someone said I rarely go before the year 2000 with what I watch. Yes, I mean 90s has such a distinct look to it, and if you weren't around in that time, or if you were but you weren't watching anime because you were too young or whatever, or if like you were just born in like 95 or whatever, clearly you would not have watched 90s anime. So it's hard to like go back to 90s anime if you weren't there for it, because the style is very 90s, you know. It's there's a lot of roundness happening, you know, and very, very, very sharp noses. So it's an acquired taste, and I can certainly understand, especially if you're like of a younger generation, of saying like, oh, I don't really dabble in 90s stuff too much. But you'd be missing out on a lot of good stuff. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, I think I live for the mid 2000s VN look. Such as what? Mox. Should I call you Mox, or should I call you Light Alice? In which case I would just call you Alice. Or Light. Which do you prefer? This is messing with my head. Let's see here. Mox is fine. Okay. Sorry, you'll always be Mox. Let's see what else. I'm trying to think of like mid 2000s VNs. Are we talking like key stuff? Because that's what I think of when I think of like mid 2000s visual novels. Let me get back here. Okay. Would you entertain a relationship proposition like you had with Japanime, except you'd be the one running the logistics and somebody else take care of the assets? That's a good question. Probably. I'm not against it. I mean, you know, if it's a cool project, if it's something that I believed in, if it's something that I thought could perform and be successful, yeah, sure, why not? I tend to like to have ownership of our of our works, not ownership of like the rights, but like ownership of the work of localizing the game. And so I like to be there on the ground level in many ways. So it would be weird to just run like logistics and admin stuff, but I'm certainly not against it. I mean, you got to, all companies have to grow, and growing doesn't always mean a straight line. You know, it's not like a straight line out for what we've done. Growing can mean a straight line out in addition to all these like supplementary, you know, ancillary lines that are going in other directions that all sort of get back to your root cause, your root objective, your mission statement. And I think it'd be fine to sort of be in the other role that Japanime was in with Testament of just kind of running things. Yeah, I'd be open to that. But it wouldn't be my first pick. Like if it was like, all right, you got a project coming up that you are involved in as the localizers and the publishers, and then there's this other thing where you're not the localizers, you're strictly the publisher. Which project do you want? I'm gonna pick the one where we're the localizers and the publisher. You know, like 9 times out of 10. Okay. Yeah, like key and Minori stuff. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I like early key stuff. Let's see here. Where was I? Ah, yes. Have you thought about recruiting playtesters from your community? Yes. In fact, that is going to be a thing that's going to be happening sooner rather than later. It's a little harder when you're a small company to organize community playtesters because there's a lot that goes into it. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's not as easy as just like sending people assets and saying, "Hey, play the game, find mistakes, or figure out what doesn't work, or find balance issues." Like I wish it were that easy because if it were, I would have already done it. There's a whole lot of like paperwork that goes into that. Not the least of which is an NDA. And once you start issuing NDAs, you like enter into this weird legal territory, and with that comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of liability, which we would be on the hook for because we're presenting some other company's works, and in our contract is a lot of stuff about privacy disclosures, releases of information, that kind of thing. And then if someone in your community playtesting group breaks that, it has a trickle-down approach, and then you can be kind of on the hook for, how that happened and if assets got out and how widespread was that asset leak or upload or whatever. I'm less worried about that in this community than I would be otherwise, but it is still like stuff you have to consider. It's not an easy decision to make of like, yeah, I'm going to flip the switch and now we're going to do community playtesting. But certainly that will be happening in the future for us because we're taking on more projects. We're taking on bigger projects. Our projects are becoming more complicated. And because there are so many projects and because there are so many nuances and moving parts, because we're working on so many projects, it's getting to a point where we can't handle it, just internally anymore. That we're being inundated with work, and at some point we're going to hit that threshold where it's like, all right, we can't keep up any longer. We need to farm this out to other folks who can provide it the time and care that it deserves and that it needs. And yeah, I would like to be able to do that. And as I mentioned, maybe in 2 episodes ago, 22 with Embryo Machine, part of the reason why Gun and Gun, not Embryo Machine, Gun and Gun is to be such a tight product is because it got in front of a lot of people, people outside of just the LionWing team, people, outside of just Keep Dry. It got into other people who had questions or they're like, hey, this wording's kind of funny, or I misinterpreted this thing because, it said this instead of that. Or like, hey, you missed a period here. Hey, this capitalization isn't consistent with this capitalization that you used over here. It was really great to get all these eyes on the product because as a small team like us, you only ever have so many sets of eyes on a product. And the more eyes on a product you have, typically, the better the end product is for people. Now, you can get into a situation where you just have like too much feedback, and that can actually have a detrimental and opposite effect than the intended one. But you've got to really like be casting a wide net for that to happen. Generally speaking, the more eyes, the better the product. And that was definitely the case with Gun and Gun, which was cool. I felt like we had a pretty good process for Gun and Gun, but it was still, people were like pointing something out like this or that. And it's like, oh yeah, actually that we're going to make a change there. So we're going to be doing that, I think, with Embryo Machine to some degree, though to a much lesser degree than some of our future projects. But we've got some stuff coming up that's complicated, and that needs to have people looking at the game and asking questions about the game for us to produce the best game. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question, I believe. Let's see here. Sin said, I'm always up for some playtesting. Of course, Sin, I absolutely, I can. You're easy because you've already signed the NDA, so I can give you whatever. This is I like this because this is so true and this is so me, and I so apologize. Sai says, I like that every time my internet cuts out for a minute or so, I come back. Bradley is still answering the same question. Thanks for the extra care, rambling, you take for each one. By the way, you can totally shelve my questions for another week if you want. No, I mean, we're only 55 minutes into this. Let's keep going. I'll try to go through the next ones a little snappier. Let's see here. What do you plan to do with the leftover Kickstarter exclusive versions inventory? So our leftovers will be sold in 2 spots and 2 spots only. Our web store, conventions. I'm not just gonna, like, if we have leftovers, I'm not just gonna like let it sit there and not do anything. Like, if we can get those out to more people, cool. Especially because we tend to not have a lot of leftovers. I think about like the Wild Hunt Festival dice. We got like 20 leftovers. You know what I mean? So it's not like we're gonna like have this huge, amount of leftover inventory in the hundreds or even 100, or in most cases even 50. But what we do have left, I'm gonna throw it up on the web store, and it's like a first come first serve. You can get it, if we still have some when we go to conventions and it's still on the web store, it hasn't sold out, we're gonna take it to conventions with us, grab it there. So it's like, why not? I'm not just gonna like let it sit here. If someone can have fun with it, if someone can engage with it, cool. And like, we get to sell this product that's just sitting here, so it's a win-win, I think. Do you entertain some lore headcanon about one of your games that you don't plan to confront the designer, or maybe did and got denied with, but still believe to be true in your heart? I don't think so. I don't do a lot with like headcanon stuff. That's not really how I operate. Like, in many ways, I'm a very literal person. So like, if something is written down, that is the way it is, especially when it's like a creative thing. If, for instance, I'll take like lore. If lore is written down, like, that's what it is. It doesn't matter what I thought the lore was going to be, and it doesn't matter what I think the lore should be, because that's not what it is. So I never try to, fool myself into thinking that, oh yeah, my headcanon's so much better about this or that, or whatever the case may be. Things are what they are, and that's the way that they are, no matter what I think of them, especially if what I think of them isn't what's actual fact. On top of the relationship you built with the publishing part of the board game industry, did you also get some contacts with the retail part, like LGS's owners and the such? Not a ton yet. Certainly, we've seen more people coming on board of like, local game shops supporting our stuff, ordering, a lot of copies of whatever game through one of our Kickstarters. The Gaming Goat is a chain of stores that we've gotten very familiar and friendly with. But by and large, we're not like a huge retail company. So like, for instance, Wild Hunt Festival, that's not really going to be any retail stores other than the retailers who like bought into the game at the Kickstarter level. You'll be able to get Wild Hunt Festival in like exactly one place, the LionWing web store. So getting into retail has never been like a big focus of mine right now. That doesn't mean that it won't at some point. In fact, that is an area that I want to grow in, but that requires a lot more finesse, a lot more legwork, a lot more research, a lot more time in front of my email, writing emails, talking to people on the phone, that kind of thing. And it's just a more time-consuming part. And when you're churning out Kickstarters like we are, and you're working on many projects as we are, it's hard to be able to fit in everything that you need to fit in. And certainly getting into the retail space has been something that hasn't been at the top of my priority list. in the past, especially in the beginning, we talked to a lot more retailers than we talk to now, and we even went through a consolidator for Sinome, because I realized like I can't. Especially when we were launching Sinome, like I have no industry contacts. The best way to do this is through a consolidator who has in-channel marketing and has in-channel distribution and can reach, thousands of stores. There's, about 4,500, LGSs across just the US. And so obviously I don't know like any of those, but this consolidator knows a lot of those. And so we'll go through a consolidator. And like the first month that we were officially released, yeah, like we got some retail interest, but after the first couple months, retailers aren't interested, and a lot of retailers don't believe in the whole anime aesthetic. That they don't see an impact when it comes to moving sales. They don't see a need for it. They don't have people coming in asking for it, so therefore they don't stock it. A lot of people just assume that anime board games don't sell. Fortunately, things are shifting, and things are shifting very quickly, which is great. But you still have a lot of like old timers and hangers on to the past of like, hey, anime games don't sell, so I'm not going to carry them. I'm not going to devote shelf space to this product that I'm not going to be able to move. I think they're wrong. I think that's short-sighted. I think that's old style thinking, and I don't think it's true any longer. But you still have a lot of people, and dare I say most people, who believe that to be true. It's not, but they believe it to be true, and so therefore a lot of retailers are not interested in a lot of the work that we do. Let's see here. If there are any leftovers for the Kickstarter exclusives, I regret not going all in, so I'll in for it. Yeah. Well, I mean, it'll be up on the LionWing web store. So there you have it. When a Silent Frank in the chat says, when a game's print runs out, how do you decide to do a second print? If you ran out pretty quickly, and if you have more people clamoring for the game after you sold through all your units, that's how. Or if you underestimated, initial demand, then it's like, okay, yeah, I kind of fucked up in the beginning, so we need to do another print run. Let's see here. How do you balance making your dedicated fans happy with exclusives, for example, and not alienating more casual players? I don't know. I don't know if we've ever alienated casual players with exclusives. I can't think of any exclusives that would alienate casual players. All of our exclusives tend to be more like collectors based items, things that are cool, things that you want to like show off, but they're not gameplay additions. I don't like hiding gameplay content behind exclusives, which is why most of our stuff that is exclusive is kind of like aesthetic type things, alternate art pieces, customized dice trays, customized dice, that kind of thing. Because, yeah, I don't want people to feel like, well, shit, I missed the Kickstarter and they got all this cool stuff that made the games 1,000 times better, and now I'm stuck with like this boring vanilla copy. That doesn't feel good. And then that makes people not want to come back to your product, because it's like, well, I'm either not going to, or I'm not going to be able to keep up with the Kickstarter stuff. I get the stuff long after the fact, and if they're not going to treat me, the kind of customer that I am with the respect that I think that I should have for giving my hard-earned money to them for their game, then I'm not going to give them any money in the end. And so you need to make sure that your exclusives are cool as hell, and that you make it apparent that you're not going to be able to get them anywhere else, and that you're only going to print so many copies. I think we do all of that. And at the same time, you do need to make sure that people aren't going to feel left out in the cold who didn't get in on the initial rush. So it's a balance. We have conversations about Kickstarter exclusives extensively every single project, where we look at, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Usually in the beginning, it's like this list of all possible Kickstarter exclusives. And sometimes on there is stuff like, additional characters that you can only get when you back the Kickstarter. We did that with Sinome. And then with each campaign after that, that's gone away. So we kind of did it that one time and was like, yeah, that felt pretty bad. So I don't want to do that again. But you then have to figure out other cool ways to keep your dedicated fans happy. And I think, with each campaign that we've offered some really cool stuff, some really unique stuff, some stuff that enriches the gameplay experience without offering a different gameplay experience. And I think those are the best exclusives in this industry anyway, at least for LionWing. Have you ever had a Japanese designer contact you instead of the other way around? Yes, yes, indeed. If a contract is not renewed, what are you allowed to do with the leftover inventory? All contracts usually identify a print run amount. So if your contract runs out in 3 years and your contract was for 3,500 copies, and at the end of your 3 years you've only sold 3,000, you got 500 left over, you're still entitled to sell those other 500 copies so long as you pay the designer their royalties as agreed upon in the contract. Are export/import restrictions or other legislation something you had to think about at some point? Yeah, I mean, the rising shipping fiasco, the shipping cost fiasco that's happening right now, and that is not expected to slow down anytime soon, is something that we absolutely have had to take into consideration. I'm a little worried, in fact, for Main Knight Saga. Main Knight Saga, and how we're going to present it. But even if you just presented it in the exact same way that it was presented for the Japanese release, is a big game. It's a heavy game. That's what I mean by big. It's a heavy game, physically heavy, poundage wise, and that kind of thing matters when you're looking at shipping costs, both freight shipping and domestic and international shipping. Once your freight shipping arrives and you're doing your fulfillment and distribution, but also depending on how big your game is, you're taking up more space on a cargo ship. And right now, space is a precious commodity, and you have to pay a pretty penny for that space. And if your game's too big, then you're going to pay a premium so that you've got room on that cargo ship for your stuff. For some publishers, they're not going to be able to survive this shipping inflation period that we're in right now, especially because it's not going to slow down anytime soon. Certainly not for the remainder of the year, but this could very well bleed into 2022 easily. And in fact, I expect it to. And in some cases, it might get worse. And some people simply won't be able to make it through this because it's not feasible right now, especially if you're a publisher, a smaller publisher, but you find a lot of success, let's say on Kickstarter, and you have a game, let's say it's your first or your second product, you've got a huge turnout, 4,500 backers, something like that. You've got a really thick miniatures based game. Oh, I do not envy those people right now. I do not envy those people right now, because even if you're like, oh, you got 4,500 backers, you're sitting on a lot of money right now. It's like, no, it's not that easy. It's not as easy as looking at how much a campaign took in and saying, well, you should have enough money to pay for whatever the gap is that has been created by this rise in shipping costs. It's like, no, that's false thinking. There's a lot that goes into this that you're not seeing, because you're only looking at baseline dollars on the front end. You don't see all the back end cost as well. And so you do have to think about those kinds of things, those restrictions and those changes in the supply line, supply chain, logistics. It's not fun. All right, Rogue, thanks for joining us. Yeah, it seems like everyone caught you up. I'm trying to go through these a little faster. Are you an aggro, mid-range, or control player? Control all day long. What are some challenges you encountered during localization that you never would have imagined being an issue before entering the field? Changing the name of something and then realizing that name is used across about 1,000 assets in tiny little places that you never even realized that name was used in. Changing the placement of something on a card, like flipping its position from top to bottom, and then realizing that you only flip the numbers and not the symbols that went with it. And so then you got to go back and you got to do it all over again. Changing the location of something because you thought it made sense before you fully understood the game, and then once you fully understood the game, it's like, well, we got to go back, we got to redouble our, got to go over our tracks and flip it back to the original way because the designers knew best. Who would have thunk? Are there some actions in your process of game selection that could fall into the market research name? If so, how useful was it? My market research process looks like this. Hey, do I like this game? Yeah. All right, cool. I'm localizing it. Part of localization is, next question. Part of localization is not just translating, but also adapting to the local culture. What efforts do you do to normie-proof what you adapt? Do you think uh, do you think you yourself are able to catch the particularities of Japanese culture that I've gotten accustomed to in the meantime, or do you a lot to unpack here, or do you consider it a moot point because your audience is mostly weebs and because you have because you have strong beliefs in respecting the original vision? So localization's interesting. Even if you're like a purist and you're like, no, I like to keep things as close as to the original source material as possible, there will always be things that you still have to localize that's going to allow your game to appeal to both your core demographic and a larger audience. And although that sounds odd to say, how are you going to how are you going to appeal to your core demographic and also to a general audience? Trust me, it can happen. You've got to think about those things, and you have to really pick your spots. Sometimes we try to stick as close to the source material as possible, but sometimes you're like, this. If I stick to the source material here, this is not a good reading experience for the English audience. It's not. Yes, it's absolutely true to the source, but this sucks to read. Like, this is awkward. It's cumbersome. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but. And you'll have people that'll say like, no, absolutely, you shouldn't change anything. They're like the transliteration crowd, and I'm like, that's a no, like no, absolutely, like let's be as respectful as humanly possible, and I think we are extremely respectful to source material, and at the same time, this is for a new audience. There are cultural differences. That is part of localization. That's like in its definition. And you have to be mindful of that. And you are not a good localization company if you're not at least thinking about that. Doesn't mean you always have to go the route of like, hey, let's make this more user friendly for the new audience. And so therefore we're going to get away from the original source material. That does happen, but not always. I saw someone make a comment on one of our videos where they were disagreeing with one of our localization decisions. And first off, I'm like, all right, that's cool. Like, disagree all you want. That's awesome. And at the same time, I'm not sure I care much. So localization's tough because you'll always have two camps, and we try to be mindful of that. I mean, you'll always have people that are like, source material, and other people are like, reading experience. And you try to pick your spots, right? If we're going to go like wildly off the rails, you do not want to do that too often. I don't think we ever really go wildly off the rails. But certainly, like, I think about some of the skill names in Wild Hunt Festival. Some of the skill names are not close to what they were in the original text. And that's because it made more sense to localize it to something that conveyed the thematic message of that skill and also gave mechanic cues as to what that skill might do. So there's a lot that goes into localization. I think people think localization's like this really easy thing. It's like, oh, you translate the thing and then you produce the thing. And it's like, well, yeah, there's about 19 million steps between those two things. Let's see here. Still in the update part. Still going strong at an hour and 12 minutes. It's going to be a long one. I'm getting through this stuff quicker, though, I promise. Let's see here. Are we getting closer to Project Requiem? What about letting some details drip? We are getting closer to Project Requiem, and I'm not ready to let details drip. Would there ever be a CCG that you like enough to take the risk of localizing it? Oh, shit. Maybe. So, I mean, I like CCGs a lot. Oh, but they are such a risk. And not only do Western game shops not like anime games, but if there's something they hate more than anime games, it's a CCG they've never heard of. And if it's a CCG anime game, they hate you. They just absolutely want nothing to do with you. Like I said, though, we're not beholden to retailers because we're not in a lot of retail shops. So that's not as big of a deal. But when you are talking about a CCG, you probably want to have some semblance of a retail presence. So there's a lot that goes into setting yourself up to be successful at producing, localizing, and publishing a CCG, at least in the West. There are some CCGs that I'm interested in Japan that I probably would, if I ever had the rights to them, I probably actually wouldn't release them as CCGs. I would turn them into LCGs, and I think that would be a better business model. Yeah, Frank, you mentioned Card Fight Vanguard doing okay. I would say Card Fight Vanguard is not doing okay. I don't think that game's doing okay at all. But certainly it's alive right now. I don't know how alive. I don't I don't know if it's thriving. It might be surviving. And that's a big name with actual cachet, and even it doesn't perform super well. So it's a tough market. It's just, I mean, CCGs are a tough market, but then you add the aesthetic to it, and it makes that climb feel even more insurmountable. So it definitely would be a risk. I know Japanime took a chance on Alternate Souls. Was that like last year? This time last year, maybe a little bit before this time last year, and it didn't go over super well for them. Um, and then the design studio ended up relaunching the project under their own name, and the campaign was successful. They're not like it wasn't like a huge success or anything based on the amount they were asking for. So it's just tough. It's tough. That is one of those times where so many times I've said LionWing is basically just this company where I localize the games that I want to play and that I like. That is one of those times where I'm like, I like CCGs, and there are some games in Japan that are CCGs where I'm like, this game is killer, and I still don't want to touch it. So, ETA on Gun and Gun. I don't have that yet. I have not heard back from from our printer or manufacturer in terms of where they're at with mass production timelines. Let's see here. We've already seen you put expansion and main games together, but are you interested in making some more radical format changes? Example, transforming a legacy game into a non-legacy game, vice versa, transforming a CCG into an LCG. Yeah, I pretty much just talked about that. I'm totally on board with, especially turning a CCG into an LCG. But I'm open to changing around formats in other genres as well. I think it's a cleaner one when you're going from a CCG to an LCG as opposed to like a legacy game versus a non-legacy game. That gets a little dirty. So I think it makes the most sense when you're talking about competitive card games. There's a lot you can do there. Let's see here. Similarly, would you ever consider pitching a retheme to a designer for localization? No. So this is where I do respect. This is where I do respect a designer's original vision. I don't have a lot of interest in retheming games because if I feel like I need to retheme a game, then to me that says that's a game that I don't believe in, and I'm not interested in working with a game that I don't believe in. So I also think that retheming a game, this is just my opinion, and that's all it is. This is just my opinion. I think retheming a game is pretty disrespectful. So, I'm not going to mention any names, but there was recently a very popular Japanese card game that got rethemed, and like not only did I think the retheming it was not my style, but I'm like, that's a game that didn't need a retheme. Like that game was great just the way it was. I don't know why they felt like they needed to retheme it. Obviously, they probably had some internal metrics and a vision for what the retheming would do for their audience, and that's awesome. I'm glad they were able to come to that conclusion. But that's not a conclusion that I would probably really ever come to. So that's not to say that I would never, ever, ever retheme anything, because I have a hard time like fully committing to that. But I feel about as close to fully committing to that as I can without fully committing to it. An LCG, let's see here. What are we talking about in the chat? I looked away for a minute. Sai, if you ever think about doing an LCG, hit me up about it. I have free opinions. An LCG like Marble Champions, but for shonen characters or something I would jump for, pun intended. Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool. A lot of licensing issues that go into that, but that'd be cool. Mox said, to me, retheming is the same as complete changing the mechanics and calling it the same game. Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's a lot of ways that you could identify and define retheming. Let's see here. Any news or ETA for the LionWing shop? Wait, is that part of the website news? The new website? Yeah, the LionWing shop is already up, but we haven't fully rolled it out yet. So we're waiting on a few things to happen before we can do that. We do have our first pre-order up, and that is, of course, Wild Hunt Festival. Pre-orders for Wild Hunt Festival will be going out generally in August. Would you consider creating your own goodies for games you localize outside of Kickstarter exclusives? I'm not sure I know exactly what you mean. Maybe you're thinking like, if we didn't take a game to Kickstarter, would we still create additional content for it like we would if it were coming to Kickstarter? Then the answer is yes. What are you currently enjoying, board game wise or video game wise? Well, not a lot. I think I shared on some other recent show that, in the lead up to a campaign, I'm pretty much all consumed with the campaign. But I have been playing a few things. So first off, I'll be playing Skyward Sword HD this Friday. Full disclosure, I don't like Zelda games, but I love Skyward Sword. So I'm excited to play that game this time without motion controls. So I'll be checking that out. I just picked up last week Swords of Legends Online, which is a new Chinese MMORPG, pretty traditional MMORPG. To me, it's like China's answer to Final Fantasy XIV. So I've been playing that. I like that. Interesting game, cool game, better than I expected. Not pay to win, which is cool. Kind of a rocky launch, but what MMORPG doesn't have a rocky launch these days? I just a couple nights ago checked out the new Sea of Thieves single-player DLC, the crossover single-player DLC with Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a very puzzly experience, which I really like. I like Sea of Thieves. I like Rare in general. I like the stuff that Rare does. Sea of Thieves is super cool, though. I really like the pirate theme. Trying to think if there's anything. I'm still playing New Genesis. I'm a big Phantasy Star stan, so of course, PSO2 New Genesis has been on tap since its release. I recently finished up Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission, the Yuffie DLC, which was cool. I liked that DLC. I think it's cool that they're integrating some of the compilation material back into canon. Seeing Deep Ground make an appearance in Intermission was cool. I'm excited for them to pull in more Dirge of Cerberus stuff and Crisis Core. I especially like the Dirge of Cerberus stuff because I think that game is criminally underrated. And it came out at a time when I loved RPGs and shooters, and I put the two together, and I was like, hell yeah, I like this game. So it's cool that they're working back in some of the story beats there, reworking them a little bit so that they make sense with the new canon, but that's cool. I meant to pick up Monster Hunter Stories 2. I didn't. I plan on doing that at some point. I think that's about it. I feel like I'm playing something. I feel like I'm playing something on Switch. Oh, yeah. Of course, it's sitting right in front of me. I picked up a physical copy of the Legend of Mana remaster. So I've got really good memories of playing Legend of Mana in high school. So wanted to re-experience that a little bit. Disguise 6 for Laniston. Yeah, Disguise 6 has been getting some not so great reviews, which is a bummer. I think it looks aesthetically very great. I love the shift from 2D sprites, which I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm such a 2D sprites like fanatic. But the shift to 3D, I think, has actually really worked for that game. It looks great. People have talked about they've kind of streamlined some systems, and a lot of people are grumbling about autoplay and that kind of thing. None of that shit bothers me, so I'll be playing it at some point. Hey, Legend of Mana is great. Grab that on digital day one, Jake said. Hey, yeah, I'm having time of my life with it. I love that game. Great memories attached to it. I love its episodic format. For someone who's really busy, it's really great for me because I can feel like I accomplished something. I can play one episode of that game and I'm like, cool, I got like a self-contained story and now I can get back to work. So it's a great way to experience a small contained narrative in the span of 30 to 45 minutes. And I like that about the game. Works with my current schedule quite well. Oh, Silent Frank, you wanted that physical Legend of Mana. You can still get it. I think PlayAsia has plenty of copies. So even though I spent a ton on a physical edition of Madara, my physical group can only play sparsely. So another group of friends of mine started playing it on Tabletop Simulator, and let's say I've consistently been up till 5 a.m. playing it the last week. That's awesome. That's always cool to hear. Ripped my question, maybe it was already answered. Rogue, what was your question? I may have missed it, so just drop it in the chat and I will answer it if I did indeed miss it. I think, though, aside from maybe Rogue's question, I think I answered them all. Woo! Got through it in 1 hour and 24 minutes. Doing a dance, doing a dance. Okay. So, let's talk about project updates. Finally. Okay. So, Testament errata packs are in the process of being printed. I don't know where they are in that process, though. That is a question for Japanime, not me. But I'm stoked to be able to offer those. I loved being able to offer the EX mode item cards. What should we call that? Reference card, which gives you all of the correct timings on when to use those items, because somehow that didn't make it into the manual. So I'm excited about that errata pack. I think people are going to be stoked for it, and it'll be great. Just, it sucks having to, you're playing your game and it's like you come across a card that has errors in it. It's like, shit, was this the card that where there are issues with? And like, if it is, what should it say? And like, where can I go to find that? And it's just not a great play experience. So I like being able to offer that. Rogue, I meant my question in Twitch chat regarding the shipping. Let's see it. Let me go back. Here it is. Found it. Following up on the export shipping question, LionWing has been taking 8 to 10,000 hit on shipping for projects. Yes. When pricing, how do you balance upping to cover shipping versus pricing out potential players? I would hate LionWing to keep taking a hit unless the volume of sales is able to offset. Yeah, I mean, this sucks and there's not any way around it, especially right now, other than to charge people higher shipping. So in the past, let's say 2 years ago, if you didn't have a super competitive shipping price for your game on Kickstarter, people just wouldn't back it. It would put someone above their price range, their budget, and it's like, all right, I can afford paying for this $50 game, I can afford paying $10 shipping, but you want $20 for it? Yeah, no, I'm out. That's a $70 game all of a sudden. I can't do that, or I don't want to do it, and I totally get it. Now, shipping charges are far more expensive than they were just 2 years ago. Shipping charges are far more expensive than they were 12 months ago. So now, you take an even bigger bath. In the beginning, I was willing and able to do that, because you do have to, you got to make a splash somehow. You've got to be noticed. You've got to have people back your game. And if that means you got to eat some of the cost, and so that your profits are leaner, well, then so be it. You hope that you bring in enough eyes and people who will then show up for your next Kickstarters, that you slowly build on top of your success and on top of your revenue and your profit, so that over time, you stack up like this lean profit with this lean profit with this lean profit with this lean profit, and suddenly you got a profit that's not so lean any longer. You can only do that for so long, because the success of a project varies so greatly depending on what the project is and how it's marketed and how people take to it, et cetera, et cetera. And so at some point, you do have to begin to charge actual shipping prices. And for LionWing, we will have to charge actual shipping prices at some point. So with Project Requiem, we'll be charging a little closer to actual shipping prices, though I still think Project Requiem's shipping is going to be very accessible. It is not asking too much, I don't think, but it is more in line with what actual shipping is. In the past, I probably would have charged $5 shipping for Project Requiem, and this time it'll be like 10, just because at this point, an 8 and this has just changed in the past 3 months, but what used to be an $8,000 to $10,000 bath that we would take would now suddenly become a $20,000 to $22,000, maybe even $25,000 bath. And that is not sustainable at all. Fortunately, people are now really kind of fully grasping with the reality of the situation for board game Kickstarter and just board games in general. It's like, oh shit, if we don't support like the companies we like, which means paying higher shipping costs because everything's going up because of the pandemic, well then our favorite board game companies aren't going to be around when this pandemic is not so impactful any longer. So people are kind of like, all right, I get it now. I wasn't on board at first, but now I'm beginning to see this isn't just one company raising their shipping prices. This is everyone. And big articles of this are going up on places like Kotaku or Polygon or these high traffic sites. Okay, I'm beginning to see that this isn't just some board game company trying to scout me for money. This is actual board game companies trying to stay afloat, trying to figure out how to, make lemonade out of lemons, these moldy, disgusting lemons that they've been given. They got to do something with. And so someone had posted something in the chat last week or over the weekend about a company that was coming up short for what it was going to cost for freight shipping. And they were basically opting everyone in to paying an additional, I don't remember what it was, $10, $15, something like that. And the only way that you can not pay that is if you opted out by a certain deadline. But if you didn't opt out by a certain deadline, you automatically got charged for this shipping. And I don't know what I don't know what the legal implications of something like that are. I don't I don't I don't know. I don't know. But I understand, why companies are feeling the squeeze where it's like, holy shit, things have changed so drastically. And I said, 3 months, really things have changed drastically in like the past 6 weeks. I mean, it's that bad right now. I don't think anyone foresaw this coming. I think with that particular project, and the name of that project is eluding me right now, but I went to the project page just to see what the comments were saying. And some people were saying like, oh, this sucks. This comes down to accounting, and this particular company did a bad job of accounting, for all their chips. And they should have been ready for this kind of thing. It's like, no, no, that's not what happened. I mean, I don't know what this company's accounting is like, and it might be bad, but that is not the reason for what's happening right now. This is a global issue that's touching more than just the tabletop product, and has nothing to do with how someone allotted money for shipping, because shipping costs has gone up 300% in the past 6 weeks. That's not something that you take into consideration when you're planning for your project at the end of 2020. It's not. I hate to break it to you. I know that's like the low hanging fruit, and that's a way to like show like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stick it to the publishers, and I'm angry about this, and I totally get being pissed off about that kind of thing, because like, who wants to be charged another $15 for a game that you felt like you already spent a lot of money on? Totally understand. And at the same time, if your reasoning for that anger is because they made a poor accounting decision, well then you're mad about the wrong thing, because that's not what is happening right now. So yes, Euthea, yeah. So we've got some people in the chat talking about this. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the question for a hot minute. Now, are they using a printer in the U.S. to speed up the process, even if it isn't as cheap as overseas? Or in situations like this, do they use the same printer? So, okay, so the U.S. printing situation. The U.S. printing situation. I like, don't even want to call it a situation, because it's not a situation, because no one's using U.S. printing. People are feeling out if U.S. printing is an option, and then are quickly realizing that it's not an option. That a game that per unit, when printed in China, would cost $2.93 is now costing $9 to print in the US. It's like, no. No one's gonna do that. That's insane. I mean, this is an industry where your profit margin is already incredibly thin. That means you have no profit margin. That means you have loss. That means you have a loss margin. So I think people were trying to figure out like, shit, can we print in the US? And the answer generally is a resounding, no, we can't do that. Now, some people are turning to Europe to do printing, and this is primarily with like the tabletop RPG scene. People are realizing that you can print in Europe, and it's very reasonable, and you don't pay a shit ton of fees and taxes that you would when printing and then shipping from China to the States or to wherever else in the globe. And so that is a viable option. That's been a viable option for like the past 2 years or so, 18 months. Yeah, about that. But U.S. printing, I don't think will ever be an option. Not if you want to like, produce more than one project. Because I think you'd be able to print in the U.S. for one project, and then your company would close shortly thereafter that first project because you printed in the U.S. Let's see here. For heavy Midnight Saga game, I'd be willing to go up the $20 line since Karate was so good. Yeah, I mean, and that's probably realistic for that's probably realistic, Rogue, for Midnight Saga. That's probably a closer to a $20 game. I don't know if I don't know if I charge $20. It just seems high, but at the same time, like, Midnight Saga, because it's so heavy, that's a game where like you don't want to make a miscalculation on because you're gonna pay for it dearly. That's not a $10,000 bath. Like Midnight Saga, because it's so heavy, that could easily be a $30,000 bath real quickly, and even that is kind of low. So, all right, back to project updates. So we talked about Testament errata packs. Let's talk about. I'll save Wild Hunt Festival for last. We'll talk with Gun and Gun. So, as I mentioned to someone who jumped into the chat before, Gun and Gun, we are waiting on word from the manufacturer with where they are in the process. So, mass production was set to start a couple weeks ago, several weeks ago at this point. To my knowledge, it did. I haven't heard from the manufacturer since that email where they said, "All right, mass production starting on this day." Manufacturers are in a better spot than they were this time last year. This time last year, they were understaffed. They were slow because of all the COVID precautions that had to go into place. Communication was bad. Clients weren't coming in, and all of a sudden, they were all coming in. So they had this huge backlog with not enough people to help fill it. Low personnel. Sick personnel, not able to come into work personnel because they're sick. It was a real disaster. We're better now when it comes to the manufacturing process. In July of 2021, we're in a better spot right now. I would never say we're in a good spot though. So there are still queues. There are still manufacturing queues. There are still manufacturing shortages, both with supplies and personnel. There is still poor communication on the part of manufacturers. There is still an overcommitment on manufacturers, an overcommitment to not only supply and product, but to deadlines and expectations of saying, hey, mass production is going to take 25 days. The next thing you know, mass production took 45 days, 48 days, 55 days, and they don't have much of an explanation for you, or they do, and they're just not really willing to talk to you about it because they don't feel like they have to, because at the end of the day, they're making your product, and you're going to listen to them, and you're going to do what they tell you, or else you're not going to get your product. And so not too many people ask too many questions. So it's still not at all in a good spot, but it's in a better spot. And that's always a good thing. So the fact that we haven't heard from the gun and gun manufacturer at this point, not concerning, not worrying, but we are getting to the point where I do want to hear from them. So I'll likely send out an email to them next week, early next week, probably on Monday. That tends to be when I do like my check-in days for a lot of our projects with manufacturers, shipping companies, freight companies, fulfillment companies. Monday is the day. It's the start of the week. Hey, where are we at? What are our goals for this week? That'll be the same kind of conversation that I have with our printing company, because I would like to know where we're at. So the good news is product was finalized. We gave the go-ahead for mass production. They gave us the date for production and said it'll start on that date. So we're in a good spot. I just haven't heard from them. Like I said, that's not uncommon. Even in a non-pandemic environment, that wouldn't be too uncommon. Right now, in a pandemic environment, it's definitely not uncommon. But you do need updates, eventually. So I'm hoping to have a more concrete update soon on that. In terms of other Gun and Gun updates, so the next Gun and Gun event is going to feature Overheat. We're going to be putting Overheat on Tabletop Simulator before July is done, which is great because that means we will hold the event probably late August. That's what the timeline's looking like right now. So I don't have a name for the next event, so I'm taking name suggestions. I love getting community feedback, community suggestions on these kinds of things. So if you got a cool name, drop it in the Gun and Gun channel in Discord. I'm definitely open to that kind of thing. Rogue said, "Take my money, boss man." Well, I won't take your money, but I'll give you something good for your money. How's that? Next question or next update. Embryo Machine. Hey, so we got the final illustration for the final map. We're done. So the only thing that we have left for Embryo Machine is I did my last pass of all of the assets just a couple days ago. Actually, got it pulled up right here. Well, I thought I did. Yeah, here we go. Found 6 errors in the final pass. Not like errors like, oh my gosh, it's the wrong card description, and not errors in like, oh, it's a spelling mistake, oh, it's a punctuation mistake, but in terms of like clarity, 6 things that I wanted cleaned up. So we'll go ahead, we'll clean that up. We then the last like actual like localization work we have to do is we have to do an editing pass on the scenarios, on the 3 missions that we unlocked for through the stretch goals while the campaign was live. So everything will very shortly begin going off to the printer. We'll begin to get some production samples and also some samples for our STL files for our print on demand miniatures. So what else do I got for Embryo Machine? I'm going to be showing off the map in this coming Embryo Machine update, which will be next week. I've got a Gun and Gun update coming this week. I got an Embryo Machine update coming next week. So that'll be the first time that you see the new map. So it took a while. I finally figured out why it took a while. So, I had shared in several streams, actually, where I was like, I don't know what's taking so long for this map. I finally found out why when it was delivered to me. And that is because they had to do, they basically had to scrap the entire idea that they had for the map. Initially, it was going to be like this indoor environment, and they had to start over, I guess, once they started play testing it, and when looking at the aesthetic and how it would match up with the other battlefields and the problems that it might present to players, they were like, you know what, we could probably figure this out to make it work, but let's not do that, and let's create another map instead. And I think so. I only ever saw like a concept drawing of what that old map was going to look like. And I'm not just saying this because like now this is what the final product is. I actually believe this. The map that we got instead of that is significantly better, and it's the best map out of any of the maps that come in the base game. Now there's some cool maps that come in the 2 expansions after the base game, but what they've created for the stretch goal map, hands down the best thing map-wise that you're going to get in this. And I love that. There's a lot of elevation, there's a lot of bottlenecks, there's a lot of maneuverability options, there's a lot of ways to flank, to take cover. It's dynamic as hell. When I think of base game Embryo Machine maps, I think of like the one back here, which very open field. You got a little bit of foliage, you got a little bit of elevation that you can get on or hide behind or whatever the case may be. This is like complex stuff, and I can now see why it took them a while to come up with this. I can also see why they chose to go this route instead of the other route, the idea that they scrapped. And I think that was the best decision that they could have made. So I'm excited to show that off. Sai asked, wait, is this for the league or the tourney? This is for the tourney. So I mentioned that we would have 2 events before the virtual league for Gun and Gun popped off. We had Operation Bulletstorm. This will be tournament 2 of 2. And then the virtual league will start. Like I said, I I want the games to be in people's hands before we start the virtual league, at least for 4 weeks. So I want people to play the game for 4 weeks before the virtual league starts, because then they'll have gotten acclimated to all of it. Although we're going to put basically all the game assets on Tabletop Simulator this month, most people are not going to play Tabletop Simulator. The first time they play Gun and Gun is going to be when they get their actual games. And so I want to give those folks who will be, fresh to the game 4 weeks to get their legs under them and feel like they are ready to compete at some sort of competitive level when the VL starts. So I'm already seeing some names in here, which is great. I like Burn. That's good. Let's go through these. Feel the Heat. Guns Heating Up. That's an NBA Jam reference. Very good. Guns on Fire, which makes me just think of that Alicia Keys song. Guns Blazing. Burn and Burn. Gun and Gun, Not Letting It Cool Off. And Hot Shot. So already got some bangers in there. Let's talk about Wild Hunt Festival. So Wild Hunt Festival, EU fulfillment's complete. NA fulfillment's complete. If you did a late pledge, your fulfillment is likely complete in both of those areas. The people who have not gotten their games who are in those regions yet are the people who locked after the cutoff date or who locked really late. We had like people locking like last night actually, and they're not going to get their stuff until August, unfortunately. But that we have plenty of warning that we'd be locking the game, and if you couldn't bother to lock your order by then, you got to wait. You will get your stuff though. I mean, absolutely you're going to get your stuff. It's just going to take a little bit. By and large, everyone's fulfilled in those areas. Australia, as I mentioned before, should be fulfilled in the next day or two. And then Canada will be last. Things are a little slower there. Let me take a drink. 1 second. I took a drink, and that water came back and hit me right in the face. It makes for a good video. So by and large, we're at like a little over 80% fulfilled for the project. People seem to be digging the game, which is awesome. I saw some people posting pictures of their party composition, which I freaking love. Those are my favorite pictures, by the way. Seeing someone's final results for completing a particular boss or route is super cool. I think Hero, let's see here. Hero posted a photo. I think it's Jake. Yeah, Jake posted a photo not too long ago of his party when going up against Tethathan. He had Thora, Okla, Suika, and Emanad in there. Barely eked out a victory there, which is cool. I love seeing that kind of thing. So keep dropping pics in Discord from your party composition. I love seeing what people's parties look like. That's one of my favorite parts of all of this, is just seeing how people play the game, how they engage with the game, what they're drawn to, what they like, what they don't like, which characters work with their playstyle, which don't. I'm getting the sense, and I don't think that this is because of the pandemic. I think just because the game sort of lends itself naturally to this, I'm getting the sense that most people are playing this solo. Now, it's a great game with 4 people. It feels really good with 2 people, but playing with 4 people is a lot of fun, a lot of coordination. And at the same time, solo play in Wild Hunt Festival, to me anyway, and of course I'm going to say this because, it's one of our games, is second to none. I think I've probably played more solo play with Wild Hunt Festival than I have group play, and it's also the game that I've probably played the most by myself, just in terms of all of our games. Testament, some upcoming games, as well as the solo play variant, the Lone Wolf mode of Embryo Machine. So the game just really is naturally designed. I shouldn't say design. It's a natural fit for single player play. I love that about it. And it seems like a lot of people are getting into that side of things. I love seeing solo play sort of blossom just in the industry at large, which is great. But I like also being a part of that blossoming by producing a game that absolutely plays into solitaire play and how fun it can be when you're just kind of like building the party you want and then going at it with some bosses. So, let's see here. So, okay, so a couple things I've seen. I've seen some people talk about their plastic boards being warped uh, when being shipped to them, but not everyone. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So a theory that I have, and I've reached out to the fulfillment center just to see if they have any theories on this as well, because it's not like it's any one person's fault, right? But it's a thing that's happening that I'm just trying to understand how it's happened. Is high heat areas right now. Um, the heat index has been incredibly high depending on what part of the country you're in. I mean, it's incredibly high for most of the country, right? But there are absolutely some where, depending on how long your product has been exposed to that heat index, could absolutely have an effect on your components. So I got a picture that someone sent me of their dice. Their dice had fused together. I shit you not. That's a thing that I would not have believed had I not gotten a picture of it. The dice fused together. So I'm seeing some people say their plastic boards are coming in like bowed or bent. So most of the time that plastic is going to bend back, it's going to straighten itself out because it is a little on the thin side, probably a little thinner than we had hoped for. But you will see that with a little bit of work, it should straighten back out. It just seems like the plastic is absorbing some of that heat and is flexing because of it. And then when that heat is let out of it, we're seeing it sort of reshape to its natural form. So don't be discouraged if your stuff comes in like that. As I think some other people in Discord have even said, like, yeah, mine came in bent, and then I did this, and they're straightened out now. So yeah. Let's see here. What else about? Let me pull up the Kickstarter because I think we got some questions here that I could probably answer on air. So Jake in the Twitch chat says, tomorrow I'll finally be able to play with 2 people. That's awesome. So there'll be 3 of you, huh? Do you mean like it's going to be you and another person, or you and 2 other people? Saturday with 4. Cool. Yeah. I want to hear how that goes. Love hearing that. I absolutely will admit solo has been super cool. Yeah. I love solo play in this game. Damn, I love it. Compared to Testament, Wildin Festival has been much easier to get into. Makes the enjoyment factor come faster. Yeah, so many people, not so many people, but some people when we launched Wildin Festival, they're like, why do I need this game? You just launched, this is a boss battler, Testament's a boss battler. And I'm like, yes. They're both boss battlers, but oh wow, could they not be any different after that? Like, don't be confused by them sharing the same genre space, because these are 2 very different games. Testament is heavy, it's complicated, in some ways it's convoluted, because it's a Kuro game. All Kuro games are complicated and convoluted. They are the 2-season life for Kuro, and you absolutely have to be in a very particular headspace to tackle Testament. Wildin Festival is not that. It's a very streamlined experience. It's something that you can learn in 5 minutes, just about 5 minutes. I mean, honestly, that's not hyperbole. I think you need about 5 minutes to really understand the core mechanics, and you can get to playing. Now, you won't fully grasp how to best play the game in 5 minutes, and you won't fully grasp how to deal with edge situations in 5 minutes. Obviously, that'll just come from repeated play. But if you're trying to teach the game to someone, all you need is about 5 minutes. The game is designed in a way to be extremely approachable and yet not sacrifice gameplay depth for that approachability. It walks this fine line that so many games, I think, can't seem to find or walk very well, and that is, how do you appeal to someone who wants to come back to this game time and time again because it's got gameplay depth, and how do you also not alienate a crowd who wants to get in but they can't get in because the learning curve is so steep? This game is like, all right, you know what? I can do both of those things. I can invite new players in, people who've never played board games before, people who maybe only play video games, since this game is so heavily inspired by JRPGs and MMORPGs and hunting type games, and also keep the core gamer happy with giving you stuff to really dive into, putting a lot of meat on the bone so that you're not blowing through content, a lot of ways to tackle the various obstacles in the game, a lot of ways to engage with its mechanics. The game is very puzzly. Like, if you break down the core game. Yes, this is a boss battler, but like how the combat engine is designed is very puzzle driven. You're constantly thinking, do I want to make this attack? Because if so, that's going to put the boss on this, and that leaves the boss to be able to attack with 5 dice next round. But I need to be able to do some damage at some point. I can't slowly keep chipping away because something is going to happen that I don't want to deal with. That will not be good news for me if I don't start making some big plays. A lot of decision points, but none of them feel crippling, which is what I love about the game. So, Landison said, I think I was expecting rigid plastic for some reason. So I shared on some stream. The plastic boards were the only thing that the manufacturer would not provide production samples on. It was in the middle of COVID. Supplies were short. Personnel was short. Shipping costs were high. Printing costs were high for the plastic boards. They were like, they sent me, I remember they sent me the production samples and I was like, hey, I didn't get the plastic boards. And they're like, we're not doing those right now. We can send you pictures of what they'll look like, but we can't get you production samples. So it's like, okay. So from the pictures, yeah, because I asked for dimensions. I wanted pictures from various angles. Things looked a little different. They came out a little thinner than anticipated. I think with increased thickness, you would actually have more rigidity. And because they're a little thinner, you don't have as much rigidity. So I know where you're coming from there, Lanniston. It is sort of like a lesson learned type of situation, but this is what happens when you're unable to get production samples. Also sort of an unintended byproduct of the results of the pandemic. It sucks. By and large, I still think the plastic boards are slick. I really like them, but certainly a little bit of thickness added to them would be ideal. Let's see here. I still love Testament, but the rulebook difference, basically, Wild Hunt Festival pamphlet. Super excited to play with others. Yeah, Testament, like a Madara, which Sin's talking about here, it's just intimidating. And like, I don't know about you guys, like a lot of my friends, they play board games casually. So if I put something big, not like super casually, we're not talking like, Monopoly casually. But if I put something like Madara or Testament in front of them, they're going to be like, fuck, dude, really? Like, I wasn't ready for this. Like, I'm going to crush 3 beers before we get to the playing part. And by then I'm going to be sleepy and I'm not going to want to play this thing. Wild Hunt Festival, I think, really respects its players' time and says, hey, you know what? I'll get you into this game as quickly as I possibly can. And I'm going to do this through like 4 pages. And a lot of those pages are going to be pictures. There's going to be big pictures, big diagrams. It's going to be pointing to stuff. It's not like getting into the nitty-gritty rules. Something that we did to really keep down the to try to keep down that feeling of like, oh, this is overwhelming, is completely doing away with an FAQ in the back of the rulebook. So Testament's rulebook, it's thick, and the last several pages of Testament's rulebook is just a bunch of questions and answers, like player questions, play testing questions that came up that we thought and that Manifest Destiny and Kuro thought were important to include. But you got like 5 pages of an FAQ in the back of that rulebook. And like 5 pages a lot when those pages are really big and you can fit like 20 questions on each page. So we went into Wild Hunt Festival with the conscious choice, like we're not doing that again. Let's go a QR code route, like something that people can't miss, that they can scan right there. Everyone has a phone. You don't have to bog people down with more paper. We don't have to print more paper. You don't have to overwhelm people with, oh my gosh, this rule book is 19 pages, not, and the person doesn't realize like, 13 pages are just like an FAQ. And it's much easier when your FAQ is living as opposed to when it's printed, because you can add to it and you can subtract from it whenever you want. So we will be using the QR code going forward. We didn't for Gun and Gun, and I regret it. We will, though, be doing it for Embryo Machine and our upcoming projects that would benefit from an FAQ. We'll be going the route that we've gone with Wild Hunt Festival. I hope more companies do that. I mean, I know some companies do that. I just hope more of them do it, because I think it's a very convenient way of making sure players have a place a dedicated place to look for specific weird situations and how how to circumvent those and navigate through or around them, while also not asking them to do that through a big old book with a bunch of questions. That's really overwhelming. So Monopoly equals hashtag filthy casuals. That's right. That's right. Sin, yeah, I know I'm going back to Madara, but I am about 25 to 30 hours in, and I am still getting rules wrong and have to check the book constantly. So when I cracked open Wildin Festival and started reading the book, I spent 10 minutes looking over it a few times, and then I never had to consult it again during play. That's the goal. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want it to sound like I'm like bad-mouthing games that are super heavy. We've got a heavy game, and I love it. And Madara is a super rad game. But you just have to adjust your expectations when you're going into a Testament or to a Madara, like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. You know, I'm committing to this. And for Wild Hunt Festival, there isn't that, and I like that. So it offers a really nice, I think, refreshing gameplay experience because of that, because you're not constantly consulting rules, which is great. Digital rot is a very real problem for that solution. Yeah. Yes, indeed. So we're working on this. We're working on DLC 2, right? And we're about finished with that. I'm going to share some shots of that here in a second. I'm going to look through some Kickstarter questions in case there's anything that I can answer here on stream. Let's see, anything that I need to address? No, not particularly. Already talked about the plastic boards. It seems like people are really stoked with the quality of the game and how it looks, how it plays. That's great. So DLC 2, even though someone said that no one cares about DLC. Hey, I care about DLC and it's my company. So let's see here. Check the chat real quick. Sen said we had a scenario where it took longer to figure out how certain rules worked than it took to play through the encounter. Yeah, I mean, again, like that's totally fine. I want there to be games like that because I like Madara, I like Gloomhaven, I like these heavy thematic experiences, and sometimes I don't want to play heavy thematic experiences. Sometimes I want to play the game more than I read about the game. So sometimes I want to play the game more than I read how to play the game. How dare they put down DLC? I know, how dare they? Rogue in the chat said, in reference to the accessibility thing I was just talking about, same with Gun and Gun. Easy to teach, hard to master. Yep. Okay, so DLC 2, let me show off 2 assets that I have not shown off. I've shown off one, I think, in Discord at some point, but certainly one I have not shown off, and I don't think I've shown off the one that I showed in Discord and on any sort of larger platform. So let's show those off. So I mentioned DLC 2 is summer themed. Here we got our watermelon pudding, which I do think that we're going to be changing the name of that slightly to Juicy Melon Pudding. Juicy Melon Pudding. I think that's the name that the editor decided on. Watermelon. And we did this with Strawberry because Suika's character, if you haven't noticed, she brandishes basically a staff that has that's kind of like made out of a strawberry. It has a strawberry on it. If you read about her in the character log, you know that strawberries they play a role in her character backstory. And we made sure that we changed the name of Strawberry because Strawberry felt a little too grounded in this reality, and clearly Wild Hunt Festival is not this reality, and so we just did a slight tweak, and that's usually how we do our localization changes. We don't do in most cases, we don't do huge changes. I mean, I talked about some of the skill changes where we had to really kind of get away from the original wording for very particular reasons that I talked about 30 minutes ago, but generally we make like subtle tweaks, and this was one of those subtle tweaks, and I think we're going to be following suit here. Let's see here. Where is... Oh, no, I don't have it on me. All right, so we haven't shown off this. This is... I mentioned that DLC 2 comes with new boss, new character, 3 item cards. And the boss and the character each come with their own mechanics card. So I showed off one of the item cards last week. It was the umbrella, the beach umbrella. And here we've got our guild diving mask. So again, these illustrations are super cool. They're super fun. They really hammer home the idea of the summer theme, not just in like what they are, because like, of course, a diving mask is summer theme, but it's just the use of colors and the colors they chose and how they highlighted those colors. And the coloration of the image itself just really screams beach vibe. You know what I'm saying? So you've now seen all of the assets for DLC 2. I really love the diving mask, especially when you put it next to, let's see here. Do I still have it up? Might be this. Yeah, there we go. So you kind of get that theme that this DLC is going for, kind of like that teal, gold, and white theme, which I love that aesthetic. Let's see here. Someone in the chat said, speaking of DLC 2, do you have the full art for Summer Lemugia? If you want to see it, it's on Rama's Twitter. Yes, so we will be including the full art of Summer Lemugia. It is on Liner Notes Twitter. You can check it out there, or you can wait for it, because that actually comes on the back of her character card. And so you will see the full thing if you want to wait. You can get spoiled now by going to Twitter and checking out there. If you want to wait for the real deal, you can also do that. It's super awesome. Yeah, Liner Notes just really they outdid themselves with this one. So yeah, trying to think. I think that's it, folks. 2 hours and 10 minutes. I think this is officially the longest LionWing Talks chat that we have ever done. Officially. I have no further updates. It's 11:15. I have been talking too long. You can mostly blame Sai for that. Thanks, Sai. There we go. Already got some thanks in the chat. Glad you didn't miss it, said Frank. Thanks, Frank. I'm glad you didn't miss it either. Always nice to have our regulars back. I see some folks dropped in here and there that were new as well, which was cool. We'll be back next Wednesday doing the same thing with a LionWing Talks episode that will probably, hopefully, be half the runtime. And I hope you all play some more Wild Hunt Festival. We are going to be streaming Wild Hunt Festival, like I said. I don't know when that's going to be happening. It might happen this Friday. I'm not sure yet. It sort of depends on if I can get my streaming set up together. The problem is, as I've mentioned, that we're selling this current house, and so a lot of our stuff is already packed up. It's a whole thing to try to get it out, get it set up, and have everything work. So that's been a bit of a challenge and a hassle. But if we can certainly stream some, we're going to. And we're going to have more news on the Team Tournament League soon. Still don't have an official name on that. But we really needed Beans and Sin to get their copies of the game, because that's going to help inform us of the decisions we're going to make on how the league is run, how you acquire points, and what the overall format's going to be. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, didn't miss anything. So that takes us to the end. Thanks, everyone, for dropping in and for watching and for supporting us. I'm glad Wild Hunt Festival is finally here. I hope you get on hunting them monsters, putting together some parties. Hope you get trounced a couple times, because, hey, who doesn't like getting trounced a few times? And hopefully you win more than you get trounced, naturally. Hope you read through the story. Hope you get involved in the lore, because I think the lore is super cool. And, this is just the start for Kradia. Hopefully you all like this universe, because there's more to come for it. When? Can't talk about that just yet. But just the tip of the iceberg for Kradia. It's been fun. I'll see y'all next time. Take care.